Welcome to this webinar, which is going to be all about jobs to be done and is by me, Ed Biden, co-founder of 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗊𝗲𝗀. Just a few kind of points on housekeeping as we get going. So this is being recorded and we will share with you the recording as well as all the links in this email. After the webinar. So we'll follow up that. If you do have questions, please ask them in the chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on them and answer as many of those as possible as we go through. So what is 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗊𝗲, you may be asking? Well, 𝗨𝘨𝗲𝗊𝗲 is the support that you deserve as a tech leader. So we give you super practical advice that is designed to accelerate your career. We're primarily targeting product managers, but really anyone who is building digital things. What makes us different is that all of our insights are immediately applicable. So we do a lot of templates, a lot of long form articles, which are designed effectively as recipes. So you can apply them straight away. You don't need to wait to go on a course to learn stuff. And they are like very, very tactical. So they're down to kind of like telling you how to like write messages or questions you can ask people. And it's comprehensive. So we try and cover all the areas that you need to know as a product manager. So that is why you should check us out. Now, we've got a variety of different things on our platform. So we've got courses, which are sort of like self-paced courses that cover a particular topic, and we're adding those on a fairly regular basis. We also have a huge kind of wiki and template library, which you can kind of dip into at your own kind of leisure, as it were. And then we also have a community Slack. So that's where you can go for immediate advice, feedback if you've got other questions. And some very active people on there, just like Sim, who's on this call. Hey, Sim. So this particular webinar is an extract effectively of our discovery course. So our discovery course covers all sorts of things about product discovery, teaching you how to figure out what to build and what users want. Jobs to be done is one of the kind of core concepts or core tools that we describe to go through. Quick question from Joanna. She said, I love 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗊𝗲𝗀. Are you planning a course on product-led growth and PLG? It is there on the list, on the long list of things that we want to cover. It's not at the top, I should say. But yes, PLG will get round to at some point, I'm sure. So with that, yes, a bit more on jobs to be done. So if you want to go deeper onto jobs to be done, then we've got a whole article on it. It's a free article, so you can read the whole thing without even paying us any money. And we've got this amazing template, which you do need an account for, but it's also free as well. So you can dig into those. And as I say, those links will be in the email that we send out. So jobs to be done. Let's get into it. What we're going to cover in this webinar are what are jobs to be done, what we're talking about here, like why would you use it, what are the benefits, and then how do you actually use that framework. And basically for us, that means five things. So it's defining your use case, defining the alternatives that people have to kind of answer that use case, the progress or sort of like the different aspects that they judge alternatives by. Thinking about kind of therefore what your value proposition is, like what makes you unique and stand out, and then the price point, because that's effectively the value that people put on solving that use case. So we'll dive into all of those things over the next half hour or so. So firstly, what are jobs to be done? So jobs to be done can be summed up by this quote from Clayton Christensen, who was one of the people that really developed the topic of jobs to be done. They're kind of been built on by various people in sequence. And he said, yeah, people don't simply buy products or services, they hire them to make progress in specific circumstances. And what does that mean? I mean, it sort of means like, if you think about it, people, they say they're going to buy like things and features, but what they're really buying is sort of like a new version of themselves, or they're buying kind of like an answer to a problem. So they're not buying a solution, they're buying an answer to a problem. And so they're not buying like saddles, they're buying kind of like the dream of riding across the American prairies. And if you've heard of the kind of famous Slack email, "We don't sell saddles," goes into a lot of detail on this, and this is effectively what he was talking about. Um, why would you talk about jobs to be done then? So jobs to be done is very valuable. Like having that perspective of like what are our users' needs, like what are our users' like problems that we're trying to solve is really valuable because when you think about things from that perspective, it allows you to unlock radical innovation. So you're not kind of locked into your existing solution and making incremental changes. You can think about kind of very different ways of solving the same problem. So, for example, if you are learning how to code, then a couple of years ago, you'd probably sign up to Code Academy, you'd spend a lot of time on Stack Overflow, answering questions. What people do now is not go to a better version of Stack Overflow, they ask ChatGPT, or they go to Cursor, and Cursor builds things for them without them having to learn how to code. So you can see that the solution has radically changed, but the need to kind of like write code or build software has not changed really at all. Other benefit is that second benefit here is like you can really understand how to talk about your product. What do I mean by that? I mean, when you start exploring people's jobs to be done and you really understand those, then you know the words and the phrases that they use. And that's really powerful for kind of messaging. So kind of talking, explaining to people the benefits you use, like how you position yourself, really using the language that they use and reflecting it back to them so you know that it resonates. And third big benefit here is you start to understand the competition or the alternatives, and you start to understand how you position yourself against that competition. So you can understand sort of like how customers perceive you, how they perceive the alternatives, and why they might choose you. And that's super powerful for positioning because you're never going to beat everyone on everything. So it allows you to play to your strengths and really therefore kind of like narrow down on your ICP, so your ideal customer profile. Like who are the people who are going to value your product and are going to buy your product, and who are the people who actually like you're never going to win because they're valuing things that you don't offer. And that's obviously like very valuable for both building building a stronger value proposition, so building more value for the people that are going to buy you, but also not wasting your time trying to sell to people that are never going to buy. Okay, so I talked about defining jobs to be done then. So, and as I say, like, I've kind of got five aspects to this, but the thing to, I would sort of say about jobs to be done here, jobs to be done is, it's a very popular framework. It's been developed by several people over time, and it's almost like, you know, spaghetti bolognese. Like everyone loves spaghetti bolognese, right? But everyone's got their own recipe. It's the same with jobs to be done. Everyone loves jobs to be done. Everyone thinks about it in slightly different terms. So don't worry too much about that. I'm going to talk through a kind of hopefully fairly mainstream way and explain some of the nuances and so on. But if you come across a very opinionated article that kind of says, "Oh, you've got to do it this way, you've got to do it that," I mean, like, great. Well, see what you learn, but also, I find it tends to be helpful not to be too dogmatic about it. So, core here, the first thing we're going to cover is the use case. And this is like the kind of like central thing. So you're not trying to understand like the persona, like who is this person, or your solution and the features you offer. Really, what you're saying is like the fundamental thing you're trying to understand as a designer, as a product manager, is like what do people want or what do they need? So the use case, like the simplest format is to have a statement that says, I want X or I need X, as in, you've got your train line. I want to buy train tickets before I travel. If it's you're thinking about why, I want to transfer money to another country. Notion, I need a way to document processes, insights, and decisions of my company. Okay. You could go for this alternative format. This is a slightly more detailed one where you say like, hey, when X, I want to, blah, which is the motivation, so I can Y. So, um, you know, when I'm thinking about going to see my aunt and uncle who live in the Lake District, I want to buy a train ticket ahead of time so that I can skip the queues at the train station and make sure there's space on the train when I actually get there. Okay. So it's just a little bit more detailed. Um, both of these are fine. Again, like you can kind of enrich this as you spend more time on it. Yeah, the more interviews you do, and I say like if you are using personas, then usually the most important thing about the persona is the use case. Like all the stuff you put around that is kind of the color. Really, what you're understanding is like, what is this use case that you're solving? Like, what is the problem that you're solving? Another way of thinking about the use case is that you're really trying to understand the buying journey. So why might someone hear about your product and buy it? And um, how can you get there? And because it's like people spend money when they are solving a problem. So you almost want to think about like how do you find those people who've got a similar problem that you can then go and sell to? A way to get there is not to kind of start actually at the start of the journey. The best way to research this is typically to start at the end of the journey. So, can you find some new users of your product? So, these are people who are already getting value from your product, but are also they remember the buying journey. So they've maybe signed up like a month ago. And then you're gonna kind of figure out, okay, you're gonna go and speak to them about like, well, how do they actually buy, the logistics of buying, which were they on this membership or this tier or that tier, like who was involved in the purchase decision, who actually got who signed it off or paid if it's a B2B decision. Um, you're going to work back from then to the actual decision. So when was the point that they committed to spending money? When did they actually make a decision between the alternatives available to them? And even you can go before that and you can say, like, okay, awareness, like, when did they become aware that they had a problem? And when did that problem become acute enough that they decided to solve it? Because people have lots of problems that they're never going to solve, right? So, my socks get wrinkled in my shoes because they're slightly the wrong size. Okay, it's a problem, but it's not a big enough problem that I'm going to go out and buy new socks. But if I have a hole in my sock and my foot starts sticking to my shoe because it gets sweaty, like suddenly that's like escalated up my list of priorities. I'm like, I got to throw these socks out. I got to go buy new socks. This was a very dumb example, but you get my point. Okay, so yeah, you can be as simple. So just to recap, like you can be as simple as just having a statement which says like, okay, the use case that we're solving is I need to do X or I want to do X, right? But a slightly more nuanced view is like when you actually start to really break down this buying journey and you start to understand, okay, like, hey, these were the triggers that made them aware that this was a problem. These were the triggers that made them kind of consider, decide they were going to spend money on it, that they were going to pick different options. This is then how the purchase actually happened, kind of like logistically, particularly important in a B2B environment. And that led us to have like a new user. Super. So, how do you research that sort of thing? Some questions you might ask in user interviews, and I've got these for each of the steps that we go through. Um, you know, things like when did you first think about buying something like this? What were you trying to achieve? How do you do X? What show me how you do Y? Tell me about that time that you did. Why do you da, 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 or why? And and with jobs to be done as well, there's this thing like, yeah, how many times do you ask why? And this is a bit of a judgment call. So, a classic example that comes up with jobs to be done is, people don't buy you know, a drill to hang a picture. They don't buy a drill. They buy, getting their picture on the wall. So, okay, but so it's kind of like, why did you buy the drill? I bought the drill because I wanted to drill a hole in the wall, stick a screw in it, and stick my picture up. Okay, why did you want to stick a picture up? Well, because I just moved into a new apartment and I want to make it feel kind of like more homely. Okay, but like, you know, there's a number of whys. Like at some point you get to the point where it's like, because I'm alive and I want to self-actualize and, you know, If you ask too many whys, you're going to get like so abstract, it's not going to be useful. If you don't ask enough whys, you're not really going to get to the kind of real job to be done. You're going to be stuck in this very tactical space where you're like, well, maybe our drill could be bigger or faster or blue. And that's not useful. So you want to find that kind of middle space where you can have a bit more of a holistic understanding of what people are trying to understand, trying to do, without kind of going all philosophical on things. Okay, bit two of jobs to be done. So alternatives. And this is like very kind of basically like, what are the other options do users have? And users always have other options, because there may or may not be direct competitors, but even if they aren't direct competitors, then you might get general tools. You might get non-digital kind of options like, people just use a pen and paper, or people might do nothing. Like if this is a kind of you think you found a new use case, like, well, the big question you're going to have is like, is this actually a big enough use case that people want to solve it? Is it a big enough pain point that people want to solve? Because maybe their alternative is just not doing anything, and that's fine. So few cases, I'm going to keep these examples the same all the way through. So Trainline, your alternative to using Trainline and buying your ticket through the app is, well, you can go to the National Rail website. I don't recommend it; it's awful, but you could do. Um, you could also just go to the physical ticket office. One of the ticket machines at the stations. Pretty easy. Um, if you're wise, you're looking at bank transfers, then obviously you can. There's a bunch of other players like Revolut. You could go to Western Union. You could go to Post Office. You could just do a bank transfer. There's lots of different options there. And for Notion, depending on what you're trying to do, you might choose Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Confluence, Asana, all these sorts of things. So there's always alternatives, is the big message. You want to figure out what those are, and then that will then lead you on to the next bit. We'll talk about kind of like how you kind of assess them. So Karthik's asking a question: how often do we need to go through a jobs to be done exercise? I would think of this as it's like a fairly foundational piece of knowledge that you'll want for a product. And it's something that you'll then want to kind of keep refining over time. So if you are thinking of spinning up a brand new product, this is probably like one of the first bits of research you'll do is go and speak to people and understand what they're doing. So when we set up Hustle we went and spoke to a bunch of PMs and we asked them, how do you learn how to do your job? And, how do you learn PM skills at the moment? And what do you spend on that? And all these sorts of questions. Great. That kind of got us going. And then, a year after we launched, we went back and we said, okay, we've kind of got some users now. We're doing stuff, but we actually want to dig a little bit deeper. So then we started asking, why did people sign up to us? And what were the triggers for them actually signing up to us? And those sorts of things. So you start to kind of like get more nuanced around it. And what you'll probably find is almost like you've got an understanding of your jobs to be done, but then at some point it feels like it's a little bit off. And maybe that's because the market has moved or you've expanded and you're kind of your user base is effectively shifting because you're starting to get in these adjacent customer segments, or new alternatives have appeared, or you're kind of realizing that you're actually trying to serve two slightly different segments. You've got slightly different use cases. So that's the time when things don't really make sense, then you want to dig a little deeper and kind of find out actually what's going on. Oh, that makes sense.
Got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
So questions you can use to kind of like think about the alternatives. What would you use if, X product didn't exist, or what else did you consider, when you're talking about this problem, this use case? If you haven't launched yet, you can do jobs to be done interviews effectively on who you expect your competitors to be. So if you see a product, you're like, oh, I hate car hire. Going to hire a car at the airport is just a massive pain. There's all this paperwork. I never get the car I want. This feels like it's ripe for disruption. Great. Go and speak to a bunch of people who have recently hired cars and ask them about their experience. And you will start to understand the job to be done. Like, why are they hiring a car? and how they think about that process. And that will give you some insights that you may be able to build a business off. So you don't need to start with an existing product. You could start with someone else's. Okay, so progress. So progress is like, what are the different dimensions that customers use to judge if you're doing a good job? And the idea here is like, you know, your customer, I mean, again, like it's kind of like big, point here. Like your customer doesn't buy your product for the features. They buy your product because they want some kind of like amazing powers, right? They kind of like want to become a better person. So what are the things that you could offer them that get there? So Trainline, how do I decide if Trainline is my best way to buy train tickets? Well, the sorts of things that they're going to offer are simpler UX, departure updates, avoiding queues, you know, price. And if I go to one of the alternatives we talked about, so I go and buy my ticket from a ticket machine, I'm going to get some kind of variation of these. So do I avoid the queues? Well, maybe it depends on the station and the time and so on. Do I get a cheaper ticket? I don't know. Is there a booking fee? Maybe, maybe not. Do I get a simpler UX? Yes, no, that, personal choice sort of thing. So you can look at these for the other examples here. So, Notion is obviously, it looks good. It's easy to kind of, it's intuitive to use. So it's easy to onboard people. It's collaborative by default. It's easy to find information. Great. That's what they're selling. When you investigate, effectively like these different value propositions for different companies, you could come up with something like this. So effectively, you said, okay, we're doing car rental. Um, Here are my alternatives. I've figured out that, oh, people who want to hire a car, yeah, they might go to 𝗣𝗿𝘁𝗴𝗿𝗀𝗀 at the car rental place at the airport. They might use Turo, they might use Uber. That's your alternative set. Then what I'm calling progress, effectively, like, the different, this is what this guy's calling factors of competition, right? So the different aspects here: price, service, variety of cars, speed of service, right? This is how people think about, these different options. And the objective here is like not to be amazing at everything, because that's generally impossible. You get into this the iron triangle, price, speed, and quality. Like you can't be amazing at everything, right? So you've got to pick where you're going to be. But what you can do is, for a certain segment of users, you can excel on the aspects that are most valuable to them. And that should make you the default choice for that segment of users. And then if you've picked a segment of users where there's a big need, that should allow you to build a big business. So another question here: how to prioritize the top jobs to be done to use in building new features when you have a diverse audience with different jobs to be done. Okay, so yeah, you generally, like, fundamentally, you want to be building for as tight a set of jobs to be done as possible, especially when you are early on. So, and it's one of the kind of common problems you'll find in as you get going, is that actually you realize you're serving, 3, 4 different jobs to be done, and you have to pick between them. So, um, how do you think about that? The way I would think about that is almost, you want to have a combination of, thinking about what is the size of the market, what is your right to win, probably like what is the price point, right? So how many people have that job to be done, right? Okay, job to be done A versus B versus C. Like, how big is each of those markets? How big is it, just in terms of number of people, also in terms of, financial size. So how willing are they to pay those people to solve that need? And then what are the alternatives? And because you know the alternatives, kind of how people kind of measure this progress, how they value the different solutions, you can understand, like, are you positioned well to win that or not? So some kind of combination of those things should kind of make you realize, okay, this segment, it's very small, we're not well positioned, it's not worth doing. This segment, it's big, we've got a great angle on it. Great, let's go after that. But everyone needs to do it. It's one of those things that does not get easier over time. That is just a difficult problem to solve fundamentally. So yeah. Questions you can ask to figure this out. What are the limitations of existing, the different solutions, and what are the challenges you face when you're using this thing? What do you wish existing solution did better? So kind of questions like this should help you feel out how people think through like what they bought basically, or what are the options they considered. Karthik's asking, would be great if you can share how you did this for 𝗨𝘀𝗲. What factors you considered as your value proposition? Yeah, great. So we'll get on to value proposition. So this one is then these are all like very tightly related, right? So when you understand the use case, great. Then you understand, well, how people are solving that. And actually, we talked about you can start with a product and then almost figure out what is the use case people are using. If you start with a product like Notion, you can kind of work back to the use case, or you can start with the use case, work down to the product. Then you get the kind of the different aspects, how do people measure them? And then that is going to help you when you see all the different alternatives and all the different aspects, that's going to help you kind of craft your own value proposition. So what are the things that you do really well that other people don't do very well or can't do, that you want to emphasize in your marketing and then deliver on in your product? So example of this, if you look at Trainline, then you'll see here, right at the top thing they've got here is, compare train and coach tickets. It gets cheaper with SplitSave, save a third of tickets, right? So very, very clearly, their customers care about cost. And that is one of the main benefits that they are selling, right? So again, if you're analyzing a product, you can look at what do they keep messaging about. If you're thinking about your own product, go and speak to some customers and ask them, questions will come on like, why did you choose us? Like, find out why people bought you, and then use that in your marketing. People bought us because X. So for 𝗨𝘀𝗲, the way that we did this, so I say we started going and asking PMs, how do they learn how to be PMs? And then we were like, great. So people use, podcasts, and they go on Medium, and they look on LinkedIn. And one of the big problems they had was they found it very difficult to kind of know if someone was kind of a good source or not. So they'd end up like reading a lot of stuff, and maybe only like 10% of it would actually be useful. And we're like, okay, great. One of our value proposition, like one of the aspects we're going to be really strong on then is discovery. So we're going to find it be really good for you to find like the answers that you want. And it's going to have a consistent quality. So now what we do, in our newsletter, when we post on social, like on things like this, whatever we do, we always do it to the same quality bar. So, and that's meant, we don't have a marketplace approach. We're very selective about the guest writers we work with, because we're not looking to generate like a million articles, or, like 20 different articles on jobs to be done that cover every single keyword. We want you to know that if you find the one article we've got on jobs to be done, it's going to be a good quality article. So hopefully that makes sense for you. So, oh gosh, still got all my marks there. Let's take those off. No? Zoom filling me there. Right. Okay, so questions you can figure out. Yeah, I mean, go and ask customers like, what's the main benefit you get from us? Why would you choose us over the alternatives? What do we do really well? Why didn't you go with someone else? These kinds of questions will give you that answer of what is your value prop, and therefore that goes back into your messaging. Okay. So final thing we've got here then is pricing. And I include pricing because it is such a critical part of coming up with a new product. And I don't think product managers generally give it enough attention. So um, it's really important to know how much people will spend on your product, like on your solution, because they might not spend anything. That's the kind of like a classic problem. You think you found a good use case, you make an amazing product, and actually people have been like, yeah, I'd buy this thing, but actually they wouldn't because it's just not a big enough pain point. So things you want to investigate, how much are people already spending on solving this problem? Um, if it's a B2B thing, what is their expected return on investment on different tools or different solutions? What is the opportunity cost of just not solving it? So, is not solving, not addressing this use case an option for them? And then also, what is the value of additional benefits? So again, going back to the Hustle Badger example, one of the things that we asked people in our initial set of interviews, and this was before we launched any kind of website, was how much have you spent on, personal learning and, professional training yourself over the last year? And what is your budget that you get from your company? And from that, we understood that, people might spend two, three, £400 a year. And we effectively then designed a product that fit into that price bracket. So we didn't say, oh, let's build this thing, and then what should we price this amazing platform at? We basically said, okay, we're going to build a product that we can position at a 299 annual price point. What is the product that we can deliver for that? How much value can we deliver for that price point that makes it just a killer proposition for people? Um, Not the only way to figure out pricing, but kind of a very common, very kind of robust way is this technique called Van Westendorp. So you basically sketch out the concept and value proposition that you can offer to people, and then you ask them, you know, what's an acceptable price for this product? And then you ask them, what is an expensive price for this product? And then you ask them, what would be an exorbitantly expensive price for this product? And when you ask those questions to lots and lots of people over time, then you can start to chart lines like this. And you can basically be like, oh, okay, so in this case, we probably want to be between 20 and $30. And actually a kind of like 26, 25, $26 price point, that's basically where we want to be. Okay, so where these lines start to intersect, the kind of where the red and the blue intersect, where the green and the yellow intersect, that's kind of where we want to be roughly. So um, there are other and potentially like more sophisticated pricing options you can go down. I'd say for most digital product, like if you're tackling pricing as a product manager, this is probably all you need to know. Because if you need to get better answer than this, you're going to have someone who's dedicated to pricing, is my gut feel on this. Um, yeah. So questions you can ask: what are you currently spending on this? What's an acceptable price for this? What's an expensive price, as we said? Um, for B2B users, this is especially important because the buying process is going to get very convoluted if there's not an existing budget. And even if you're selling to enterprises, it can be as bad as like if you don't know the cost code or it's not obvious which cost code someone's going to assign to you, that is really going to delay the selling process because you might even get two stakeholders at a customer, a potential client who want to buy your solution, but they're kind of arguing about whose budget it goes into. And so even though you can deliver like tons of value, you can't sell in. Whereas actually, if you kind of constrain yourself and say, hey, this is the problem we solve, and this is the cost code that we fit into, and this is the existing spend we displace, that's going to be much easier for them to process and kind of remove any tension they have internally between different stakeholders. Okay, that was a fairly whistle-stop tour of jobs to be done. I say we've got this lovely template, which you can see here, where you've got different research questions. So all the questions we kind of outline, it's got like a bunch of examples, different consumer ones, and then some B2B ones as well. So yeah, as you as you do your interviews, then you can start to kind of like fill this sort of thing out. And I'd say like, it's not just interviews, right? Like you probably start with qualitative interviews so that you can get a really nuanced understanding of what people want. Once you've got that nuanced understanding, then you can do the kind of classic thing where you kind of like go from qualitative insights to quantitative insights. So your onboarding, you might start to include a few different jobs to be done, kind of master bit. So you go from like interviewing everyone on the phone who joins who starts using your product to an onboarding form that says, "Hey, did you sign up because you want X, Y, or Z?" And then depending on what they choose, maybe that's going to affect like how you market to people in the future, which onboarding funnel you send them down, lots of different things. So you can see like a lot of generalist tools like Notion will have these kinds of surveys where the first thing they do is say like, yeah, who are you? Why did you choose to buy Notion? Because that then helps them both customize the product, but also gives them a valuable feedback signal of who are they actually selling to, which segments, um, uh, and which use cases are they satisfying best. That's it. Any questions?
So, hey, hey, Ed, I put one in the chat there about, great point about the cost categories, right? Figuring out where the cost is going to come from for your product and where the savings are going to come from, and what happens when they're different. Because clearly, if you could hire somebody or you could hire my piece of software to, avoid hiring somebody new because I can make you much more productive, right? Those are two different cost buckets there. So I just wanted to know what was in your mind as you were talking through that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing like yes, they will come from different cost buckets, but ideally it's going to be the same budget holder. So you can go to the
Okay.
person who's got that kind of budget for headcount and you say, hey, look, currently you're spending X million, X 100,000 on this type of role. And actually you can spend this much smaller amount on my tool and you'll reduce your overall spend. And particularly then if you can build like a return, can you build a model? Can you model that out for them? Can you kind of create the business case for them? That's the direction you're going to be heading in for enterprise or B2B sales.
Thanks for that. And yeah, ideally it's going to be at a reasonably um, controllable level. Like you're not going to have to go to the CEO with that. It'll be at a department or whatever level, right, to get them to buy into your software. So I got it. Perfect.
Yeah,
Cool.
exactly.
Thanks.
Super. Any other questions?
Can I ask with voice, Ed, or do we put it in the chat?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Thank you. If you were to like stack rank jobs to be done, user journey mapping, user personas, opportunity solution trees, like all of these different discovery frameworks, where would you rank like jobs to be done in terms of ones that you yourself would implement when going 0 to 1? Because there's a lot of things that we could be doing, but just making sure it's the most impactful.
Yeah, great question. Um, so these are not kind of like for like tools that you can switch one in for another, right? They are different ways of either understanding the journey or prioritizing what you're doing. So, you know, if we take those three, four you mentioned, like jobs to be done, customer journey mapping, opportunity solution trees, they're probably like my three favorite frameworks. Um, I would always start with jobs to be done because that's the kind of like most fundamental. Like, what is this business about? What is the value that we are offering? Um, you're going to get like a certain way with just that. Once you start, once you've kind of got this like rough idea of like who your customer is, what your value proposition is, like that's not going to evolve like a lot day to day, right? As I say, you're going to get slightly different nuance on it, but it's going to be fairly static. You're probably like at that point, you're probably going to want to do a customer journey map, which is a much more tactical view of like screen by screen, step by step, how are users feeling, where are they getting stuck. But your whole customer journey map effectively takes for granted or takes, as a foundation, like what is the use case you're solving for, right? And your customer journey map is, yeah, it's going to have a shorter life cycle. It's going to change a bit more fluidly. And then opportunity solution trees, I guess this is almost like just a different way of thinking about what are your ways of prioritizing things. And so you could have a customer journey map and plot out on that, like where are the opportunities, where are the pain points, and so on. You could do that as an opportunity solution tree. And I think that is a kind of depends how you think, like what you find most useful. It's almost like a personal choice about, or a kind of team choice, like what's more useful.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Karthik has a question here. What are the artifacts you want to maintain? So jobs to be done is one, but what are the other? I mean, it's really is whatever is useful. So I think about like what are the problems you're trying to solve as a team, and then use whatever tools are useful to solve those problems. So I would never kind of suggest that a team has a standard set of frameworks or artifacts that they maintain. That's a bit back to front, right? Like these are tools. You don't just have the tools, you're trying to solve problems for your customers. So what do you need to solve those problems for your customers? Okay, so another question from Joanna. I'll be taking over a new product that already has users and some paying users. The goal is to increase paid users, but the product doesn't have PMF yet. I believe job to be done can be handy here and help in reaching that fit by understanding the different use cases. It's an entertainment mobile app, so B2C. How do you suggest tackling that? Yeah. So one of the most powerful things you can do there, because if you don't have product market fit, and people talk about product market fit in different ways, then the first thing you want to do is make sure you're solving for like a particular job to be done. And the second thing you want to do is make sure you actually have a solution that kind of delivers sufficient value. So first thing I do is go and speak to a bunch of users and try and flesh out like what are the different jobs to be done that you're solving. Those are effectively like different customer segments or different ICPs. So try and tease those out a bit. Then you need to decide which of those segments you're going to focus on. And then you can think about how, is your product solving for that. So a good way of doing that is the kind of classic, product market fit survey. Superhuman did this kind of, they're kind of famous for doing it. Again, this is something you can go and search for on 𝗨𝘀𝗲. We've got quite a good case study. Basically, you go and survey all your users. You say, what's the biggest benefit we offer you? How disappointed would you be if we disappeared? And how would you describe yourself, or how would you effectively that's it. And so what you'll get then is from the description and the kind of how disappointed people are, you'll understand kind of how well are you serving different segments, and then what is the biggest benefit will help you understand the value proposition you have for those different segments as well. So that's one way of doing it. That's kind of like very basic explanation. As I say, go and dig into we've got a couple of articles on product market fit surveys, and they will give you a bit more detail. And Jen asking, will the slides and recording be available? Yes, they will. We will email you all shortly. Probably tomorrow or the next day, with the recording and also the slides. Okay, just to wrap up then, so as well as the slides, we have got a bunch of other articles here. So I post on LinkedIn very regularly, so give me a follow. 𝗨𝘀𝗲 also has an account where we post kind of breakdowns, walkthroughs, tips, tricks, all that sort of stuff. If this was useful, you'd probably love our product discovery course and all of these other articles that we have on jobs to be done or discovery as well. We put all of our recordings of these kinds of webinars on our YouTube, which will be in this link. And we have lots of other exciting events coming up as well, which you can find in this link here. So thank you very much for coming along. I will wrap up there. And do give me a shout on LinkedIn or wherever else if you have any more questions. Thanks very much.